All right. So what I want to do though, for those who are following along here in the demo tenant, I want to check in with everybody and make sure everyone was able to go ahead and log in here to office.com utilizing those demo credentials that I did provide to you in the chat. So if you don't mind letting me know in the chat with a GTG, a good to go, to where you're essentially looking at on your screen what you're seeing on mine. We're essentially going to be mirroring one another here today. You'll be mirroring what you see on mine. All right, Marcus, Will, great. Appreciate the feedback. Allison, great, and as well. And we encourage you to follow along with the demo credentials. If you're like with Peter, if you're unable to, totally fine. You can watch, you can observe. There's plenty to learn here as well from that. Just give everybody another minute here just to let me know you are inside of the demo tenant with those credentials that I provided to you in the chat. If there's any questions, please let me know. Okay. Like I said, I will be checking in with you with those kind of good to go checks as far as we go along here today. Just to want to make sure everyone's doing all right, following along. Okay, there's gonna nothing be too crazy as far as real technical anything this, that, or the other. So it's going to be pretty easy to follow along. But if you do have questions, don't hesitate to ask or anything like that. We really want to make sure that everyone is getting the most out of the training here today. So really happy to answer any questions that you may have as we go through our today. So really appreciate the feedback and everything like that as we move along. Really does help us out a lot. Right. So as everyone here is getting into the demo environment with those tenants that I've provided, I just kind of want to, kick things off here by talking about really what brought us here today is security, because security is one of the most really important aspects of, any architecture, all of your infrastructure, because it provides the assurances of integrity, availability, as well as confidentiality against, attacks or anything like that, or abuse of your tenant or your, and the data within it. And Microsoft's security framework is based on 4 pillars, which are identity and access management, information protection, security management, as well as threat protection. And starting off with identity and access management, that means that, only allowing the right people to have access to the right resources at the right time. As well as when it comes to threat protection, that's really along the lines of protecting against cyber threats, such as malware, your viruses that occur, or other malicious activities that could be trying to infiltrate your organization. And then when it comes to information protection, that's defending your sensitive data, such as intellectual property, financial data, PII, any other customer information, anything along those lines. And then finally, security management, that last pillar, which manages your security posture across the organization, using monitoring, detection, response, and security incident remediation. So those are those 4 pillars that I mentioned. And what we're going to be doing is kind of highlighting those as we go through with our examples about talking about certain things like implementing policies, sensitivity labels, things like that, and talking about some other security features here within your M365 tenants as well as we go along. So what I want to do is go ahead and dive in here to, first and foremost, where these things are set up. And that is done here via your admin center. So what we're going to do here on this landing page here for M365, you will notice over here on the left-hand side in this little navigation panel, there is a little icon that says admin. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click on that admin icon, and that is going to open up your Microsoft 365 admin center. Right. So this is where we're going to be taking care of everything. And there's really like 2 main tools that we're going to be focusing with that exist within your M365 admin center that are a part of the security structure here within Microsoft. It's going to be Microsoft Defender, Microsoft 365 Defender more specifically, as well as Microsoft Purview. So they have different things as far as what they really are accountable for and what we're going to be kind of taking a look at here. And we're going to be starting with Microsoft Purview because we're going to go ahead and jump into our first little demonstration here. which is going to be focusing on that third and fourth pillar that I was talking about, information protection as well as security management. So we're going to be talking about data loss prevention as well as our compliance manager. So the compliance manager helps you manage your organization's compliance requirements with greater ease and convenience. It's helping you follow the rules that are keeping your data safe, and it shows you what to do and how well you're doing with it as well. And data loss prevention leverages the labeling and classification capabilities of Microsoft Information Protection to apply policies and actions to sensitive items across different locations and platforms. So this is kind of like our first little demos, really kind of one kind of takes it into the other as far as creating a policy that is going to make sure that we're adhering to the compliance, the regulation that we have to go ahead and abide by organizational what's the word I'm looking for? I'm so sorry. Organizational practices or law, or abiding to law, which is also super, super important. And that leads us in then to where we'll go ahead and take a look at sensitivity labels, which exist within policies as well. So it's a way you can create a sensitivity level, then create a policy that enforces that sensitivity label. So they kind of tie together a little different as far as what one is doing versus the other. But we'll go ahead and talk about both of those here and start with that data loss prevention policy. So what we're going to do here inside of our admin center is we're going to go ahead and click this little show all icon, because this is going to bring up essentially everything that we need to go ahead and see. And really where all of this exists as far as most of your security settings, it's within your admin centers, and you have specific ones here for whatever features or whatever tools you're utilizing here within Microsoft. The security section is Defender. The compliance section is Peer Review. Then you have your endpoint manager, identity, which is Microsoft Entra ID, as far as that's concerned. And then there are specific security centers here for other applications that all exist here. And there are more admin centers for them specifically. But really where we want to start here with data loss prevention is this compliance center. So I'm going to go ahead and everyone click on that compliance option here in your admin centers. And what that is going to do here is open up Microsoft Purview for you, the compliance portal within your M365 environment. So what we're going to do is go ahead and find here on the left-hand side, we want to go ahead and find our data loss prevention section. That is where we're essentially creating our first policy. So from this drop-down menu, I want to go ahead and click on data loss prevention, where it gives you some options within the data loss prevention section to go to. What we want to do is head to the policies section first and foremost. So let's go ahead and click on policies. And here you would see listed all of the policies that are being enforced within your organization tenant. You can see here, there are some default ones that are already implemented here in these demo environments. But what we're going to do is walk through the process on how to create your own. And when creating your own, what is it exactly that you're looking to do and how to do it. And what's really great about this too is it does these policies here, to create these policies. It is very easy to do, and it's done essentially through like a wizard almost to make this very, very easy for you to understand. It gives you links to documentation when you're maybe not quite sure exactly what the question is that you're asking or the setting that you're having to set up, which is super, super nice. So what we're going to do is go ahead here and create a policy up here in the top left-hand corner. And that's going to take us here to essentially our policy wizard, is the way I like to think about it. So within Purview, as far as data loss prevention policies, you're able to go ahead and you can utilize templates, which are created here, which Microsoft already has. You can also create a custom policy. You can also add essentially, categories or things that the policy is going to monitor, and like kind of customized templates is the best way to go ahead and put that. But what we're going to utilize here today is just essentially a financial template for credit card numbers, routing numbers, things like that. So what we're going to do here in our category section is click on the financial option. And from here, we're just going to go ahead and utilize the US FTC, Federal Trade Commission Consumer Rules template. And if you click on that, it'll bring up here the details on the right-hand side, giving you an overview of what this policy is looking to do as far as what information is it protecting. And we see here that it is the credit card numbers, account numbers, routing numbers. So that's perfect here for our example today. So once we have here, we're starting with the template, the one we have chosen here for the FTC consumer rules. Let's go ahead and click on the next icon down here at the bottom to where we need to give our policy a name. Now, we do need to change this name and only a little bit because we're all creating this within the same tenant. So we have to have a unique name since we're all working within this demo tenant together. So what you can do is go ahead here. You can keep the default name, the name of the template, as you see here where it's listed, but right in front of it, go ahead and just add your name to it. So I'm just going to go ahead. This is Tyler's U.S. Federal Trade Commission Consumer Rules policy. So for Marcus, say Marcus, Will, Allison, etc. Just so that name's unique. And we'll leave the description, just the way it is, because that is exactly what it's looking to do here and enforce. So we'll just go ahead after we update that name, go ahead and click next one more time. Now, there are essentially here, you can assign the policy here to specific units, or the way you can think of it is almost like groups of people or groups of users within your organization, or groups of users or things like that, to where it could go ahead and it be restricted to those users or not to those users. But what we want to do here is apply the policy to our entire tenant. So when you see admin units, it'll by default say full directory. And that's what we're looking to do here today. But you can scope this down. And that's going to be talking about a lot as we go through here today, as far as the level of scope that we can apply to the level of how we can fine tune these policies to apply to certain people, certain applications, certain devices, things like that. We have that ability to do that as we go through here today. But we're just going to go ahead and apply this to our full tenant today. So what we'll do is just go ahead and not do anything on this page, easy enough, and then go ahead and click next down at the bottom, head to our next page, to where this is where we had essentially who it's applied to. Now it's where do we apply it? So here we have the option to go ahead and specify, are we applying it to email, OneDrive, devices, Teams, other SharePoint sites, really anything that is really document centric as far as within your organization. SharePoint is going to be, or OneDrive is going to be the main place where you're storing documents that are created in Excel, Word, PowerPoint, things like that. So that's why it's applied to there as opposed to just to Word itself, because it's where the documents are saved, not necessarily where they're created. And what you can do is monitor here, as we see, you have the ability to edit these as well. So you can specify with OneDrive accounts. You can we have it set by default, as we mentioned before, to all users. But I could scope this down even more to certain OneDrive accounts here, or to the point where I excluded people who maybe need to have more access here. They can't be so tied up to this financial information. So that's the ability here I'm talking about, being able to fine tune this and really make it work best here for your organization. So you have that ability here with all of these options to go ahead and specify, specific sites not to go ahead and apply it to, or specific user devices or things like that. Anything being managed here by Intune here, as far as your devices are concerned, that would be, you could go ahead and apply that down to essentially the hardware level, the operating system, which is pretty wild as well. So we're just going to go ahead and essentially apply it to everything, because the demo tenant, I'm not too worried about narrowing that scope of this. It's just more the idea of explaining the possibilities here that you have and the options that you have. So we're going to go ahead and leave all of those boxes checked, apply it to everything that we see there, and go ahead now and hit next once again down at the bottom. So this is where we start to define our policy. And yes, it's saying we're going to go ahead and be reviewing our documents and all of those all of those endpoints that we mentioned here that we saw earlier on the previous page. But now we need to go ahead and review essentially how are we finding this and the confidence of it, because we have to specify here and utilize the tools inside of Purview to go ahead and turn on the tools and say, hey, yes, this is going to be a credit card number. This is what we're looking for, and how confident they are in going ahead and enforcing that within the policy. Because yes, there are other 16-digit numbers that exist in the world, believe it or not. So what we're going to do is, and all of that's here set up in Purview, as far as it is able to go ahead and utilize that here through a lot of training and things like that to be able to recognize that inside of documents. But we also have the ability to set how confident it has to be as well, depending on how strict, really as far as maybe thinking about in the regulatory world, we don't want to be, out of compliance in this case, maybe when it comes to this data. So we might want to be a little bit more strict about it. But when it comes to maybe personal information, like addresses or things like that, maybe not as. So just to keep that in mind, but that's that ability to have this control. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and review and customize the settings for this template that we are implementing. So we'll leave that bubble checked right there and go ahead and hit next to go ahead and take a look at the info that we are protecting. So that is perfect. So that essentially takes the description here for you, or the information that we're looking to protect here within this policy. And if you click edit down here, right below those, this is where you bring out here. These are a group of sensitivity types. So the types are what we are looking to enforce here with the policy. What type of information? Now, you have the ability to go ahead and add more to these. And when we create the label, we'll see this in action and a little bit better. But this is created essentially and generated from the template. So there are tons and tons of different info types that we'll see here, like I said, a little bit later in a little bit more detail. But what I was talking about here as far as the confidence levels, this is where you set here how confident it has to be in order to enforce the policy on the documentation that may contain a credit card number. And if you take a look here, there is a little learn more option there, that as far as what it's searching for and essentially the confidence level that's recommended, as well as elements here that it's looking for. And it is a function that exists here within Purview that is it's looking for that anything that resembles a credit card number, essentially, is what it's plainly put. But there is a lot going on in the background in order to go ahead and do that. So you have the ability to set these confidence settings. There are always recommendations as far as, usually it's never low, it's medium or high. And you can see here by default from this template, it's already set for a high confidence for credit card numbers and medium here for bank accounts and routing numbers. And we'll just leave it that way for now, but just showing you that's how it works and that's what it's utilizing. It's usually, it's functions that run the information here within the document through in the back end. It's some pretty high level stuff. But then it went and goes ahead and applies the confidence rating based on that function, and as far as how well it matches the outcome to go ahead and enforce or not enforce. It's kind of like Boolean at that point, true or false. So we'll just leave all that by default. That's totally fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel right there and go ahead now and click next once again, because these are the actions now. So you have to think here within the policy. Okay, so if the policy is essentially violated, what do? So we have some options which are really, really cool. So when the content matches the policy conditions, you can show policy tips to users or send them a notification. This is like a nice way to remind them, hey, we're not sending these numbers via email, or we're not sending them via Teams messages here. We have a specific method in place that this policy is helping us enforce, so we don't go out of out of compliance or anything like that, or just violate our organizational compliance as well. So you can see here, detect when a specific amount of information is being shared at one time. You can send incident reports here to an administrator when it's being violated, things like that, or send alerts here to any of the rules when the rules is matched, essentially, if anything is going on. So as far as policies being violated, which is pretty cool. And you can customize the tip in the email. You can go ahead and that you send to the user who possibly violates the policy. It can be encouraging and things like, hey, here's a review of the policy itself, so they know exactly what they can and can't do, any kind of documentation you want to share with them. So things like that, really, really nice here to go ahead and teach your users as well and inform them here maybe when they are, they need to, hey, back it up a little bit here. That's not how we're doing things here. A big fine could be on the way, so we want to be careful. All right. So once again, I'm just going to leave that as well. I just want to more explain that those are the options that you have. And I'm going to go ahead and hit next one more time. So you have the option as well to go ahead and these are like just more details essentially here and more places that you can monitor, as well as you can go ahead and set any override settings or custom access to but if you want to go ahead and you can choose who can access certain files, or maybe someone who can override the policy restrictions, maybe saving this for administrators or things like that. But also at the same time, you want to keep this group very, very small, because you want to make sure that if you are having to override it for whatever reason, and I'm sure there's instances where you would have to, you could go ahead and make sure that the right people who are delegated to have that access and that is within their job description are taking care of it. So like I said, you can turn these on if you want. You could go ahead and block certain users, override the rule to automatically report if it's a false positive as well. That's another thing to want to make sure someone who is monitoring the policy in that regard. You can set, you can audit and restrict certain devices or activities on certain devices. Like here, devices that are monitored here within Intune, allowing them to paste it certain places or copy it to a clipboard or put it on a removable USB device. It goes into audit mode. You could totally block it completely to where there's never an instance where that's acceptable. Certain things here, if you're not utilizing, any kind of USB device for transporting data, then I would block something like that, because that could mean foul play. You never know. Printing as well is another one. If this kind of information is not to be printed, to not have physical documentation of it as well, those sort of things. So you have those options here within this page on the policy as well. And then lastly here, third-party applications here. So any of these applications do have the ability to be monitored by Microsoft Purview. Essentially, the documentations which are shared with them exist within them. You can see here WebEx, Dropbox, Salesforce, things like that are applications that here this policy could apply to, which is really, really cool, especially if you're utilizing other, third-party applications and things like that outside of your Microsoft ecosystem here. Totally fine. We totally understand that. And we want to go ahead and be able to go ahead and enforce that policy as well within those applications here. So Microsoft really becoming one of your, really your main centralized place here to go ahead and set up your, policy compliance, regulations, everything. So awesome. So like I said, you can have some fun with this. You can set any of these settings the way you would want. Doesn't really matter here for our demo purposes today, just walking you through as far as how to set this up. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and hit next one more time, to where this is the last little bit here before we go ahead and publish the policy. So we have the option to go ahead and run it in a test mode. Obviously a great way to go ahead and make sure that the policy is set to your liking before you start enforcing it across your entire organization. Or once you do that, you can go ahead and review it. You can always edit policies and things like that. But if you make changes, it's not going to be enforced right away. If you're testing it, it would be, sort of thing. So I'll just go ahead and run it in test mode. Doesn't really matter, once again, to go ahead and set that up. And I'll go ahead and hit next one more time, because these policies do take some time to start to enforce. So it's one of those things you could try, adding bank credit card numbers to documents within these demo tenants. It does take usually an hour or so to go ahead and get set up, maybe 2 sometimes. So we'll just go ahead and set it up, and I'll leave the tenants open for a little bit longer in the day if you want to go ahead and have some fun with that later on. Like try sending emails with, fake credit card numbers or banking numbers, and you'll see what happens. It's going to get kicked back to you because it's in violation. Marcus, it takes so long here in these demo environments because it has to go ahead, and it's just the way it's set up here within Microsoft. It has to enforce the policy itself, and I will be honest, these demo tenants, these are given out by Microsoft for free. So certain things within them, it's not high priority as far as making sure that they are functioning as quickly as possible as they would be within your own organization. But things like you'll see here, and that's just something I know just from utilizing these demo environments a lot. Policies don't take super long. When you enforce labels, that can take a lot longer because that's something, because there's an encryption process that goes on. So it has to get set up here for that encryption process to go ahead and to be sure that it's going to be applied correctly and enforced correctly on certain documents. And we'll see that here in a moment when we look at sensitivity labels. Right. So what we'll do is go ahead and submit this policy. And if you get a little error like this, don't worry. It's because multiple of us are trying to create a policy all at once. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and submit it one more time. I bet I get the same error. That's totally fine. So that doesn't mean that your policy didn't create. And this is a thing here when you're doing a live demo with everyone creating the same policy all at once. If you come down to the bottom here and hit cancel in the bottom right-hand corner, and go ahead and click confirm to not save those changes. Then what you need to do here on this policies page is give your policies a refresh, and you'll see yours is created. So I see Will's is done, Marcus is done as well, mine's done. Like I said, if you got that error, that's, usually the first person to complete it won't get it. Everyone else after might. If you just cancel it, it's totally fine. It is there, and you can take a look at your policy furthermore from there. Now, it's one of those things we could always try and see here if it's already up and running. And one way to do that, and I can go ahead and show you here on my screen and save you having to do this on your own until later. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open up Teams, and I'm gonna try to send a message with a credit card number and see here if the policy is being enforced already. Like I said, more than likely it's not, but we'll give it a go. Sometimes they do come through pretty quick here in these demo tenants. I always like to give it a shot. All right, let me see if I can do it here. Let's see if it works. All right. And a message to Deborah. And let's see if I can just. Yeah, I got someone else's credit card number here, and we're going to go on a spending spree. Yeah, see, it's not going to be enforced yet. But one that does happen when it is enforced, what you'll be able to see essentially is this message will be deleted automatically. The same thing with an email. If you go ahead and try to send an email with that information, it'll kick back to you. So that is A-okay. We'll keep rolling here instead of just waiting to see that happen, because it's going to take a little bit too long. And with the time we have here, we want to go ahead and get into as much information as we have here for you. All right, as we can here while we have the time we have here for you. So this kind of leads us here into something similar when it comes to information protection as far as these lines, talking about sensitivity labels and how to make one. So it does two things for you. I mentioned one earlier. It labels the document for one, with things like a watermark, for example, but then it also encrypts the document. So if you encrypt the document, obviously you'd have to set permissions here before it can be viewed by anyone else. So if it contains personal information, sensitive information, we'd want to go ahead and use these sensitivity labels to find that information, encrypt the document to make sure that it is only being seen essentially by the eyes that need to see it. So even if you send it to someone else, it's still encrypted. So you have to go ahead and essentially it's like setting permissions here if you've ever done this within your OneDrive, like to share a document maybe with outside your organization or something. You can go ahead and essentially what it's doing, it's giving access. It's not the same as encryption, but it's giving access to the document as it is in rest here within your OneDrive account. And you're adding users who could view it or edit it if you're collaborating with someone on it, for example. So it's really helping an organization, though, and ensuring that important information is protected and not inappropriately sent. So let's say you have to send out, I don't know, like a big document. Let's say it's like 100 pages or something like that. And if you have sensitivity labels set, information protected labels enabled. Even if there's let's say, for example, we're going to make one for social security numbers. Let's say it's on page 52 of that 100-page document. The program will detect it and let you know that there's sensitive information on it, and it'll go ahead and apply that watermark and encrypt the document. So and how these are implemented or applied or through policies, much like how we just did. So this is why this is another portion, another aspect here of Purview that can be applied to your policies. So let's go ahead and create a sensitivity label. Let's go ahead and have some fun with that. So over here on the left-hand side, we're still within our Purview center. Over on the left-hand side, you want to go ahead and find the information and protection section of Purview and go ahead and expand that out. You can see here, this is where our labels are. There's labels and then there's label policies. We're going to start with label. We need to create the label before we create the policy that enforces the label. So we're going to go ahead and click on labels. And once again, we're going to go ahead and create our own. Go ahead and walk through it and creating one from scratch, which is pretty cool. So you can see here on our labels page, let's go ahead and click create a label. Right. So similar as far as we saw before, it's just essentially like a little wizard, making sure we have all the information that is required for a label to exist filled out here for us. So let's go ahead and first off, give it a name. And you can just call it here by your name, like this is Tyler's label. You can use your first name once again in the label, just to ensure, because these do have to be unique within the tenant. So that's why we're using our name. And the display name as well, we'll go ahead and just give it the same name. And as well as we'll give it a description. Those are our 3 required fields on this page. And what we're going to be doing here is protecting social security numbers for this one. So you can just write protect SSN, protecting SSN, whichever works best for you. And there also is, you can utilize kind of like folders and things like that, because labels can also have sub-labels and things like that. So different places where they're stored, it gives you an option to go ahead and set a label color. You don't have to if you don't want to. I always do. I'll just set it to green. It's my favorite color. So like I said, you can have some fun with that. And I'm going to go ahead and click next down at the bottom. So this is where we're getting into essentially the how this label is applied, the scope of it, just like the policy, like the who, the where, the what. That's essentially what we're doing here with the label. So this is essentially here, will this label is it being applied to items, essentially, and everything that exists here in the items will set files created in our Microsoft applications, our emails, essentially in all versions of Outlook, as well as we can set this to the scope of essentially meetings, like meeting information here set in Outlook, or as well as Teams, where that can be applied to. So there are a few other options here as far as groups or sites, as far as we're thinking about here, SharePoint sites, your groups here within any M365 groups or anything like that. There are a few extra steps that need to be completed. The nice thing for that is there is documentation. If you click on that, it'll take you to the Learn path and walk you through that. For the sake of time, this takes a little bit longer for us, but it is great information that you do have access to, as well as the schematized data assets. So any database is what we're really thinking about there, that you could go ahead and any data that exists here or documents created from this data or how it's utilized within, like, SQL or Cosmos, or essentially it can be monitored there as the label can be applied. This policy can apply there as well. You have to do a little bit more for that. That's utilizing the purview data mapping. A little bit more complicated as well, but those are options that you do have available here for this label and the label policy, as we'll see here coming up. But we'll just go ahead and apply it here to essentially documents and emails and things like that for this case, and go ahead and just leave all of those boxes checked there, and then go ahead and hit next down at the bottom to head to our next page. All right. So what we want to do here is essentially what the encryption and the markings that we're going to apply that this label is going to be looking for, essentially the label that's going to be applied to the document. So we want to be able to go ahead and apply encryption, also be able to remove it if necessary. So that's why it's apply and remove encryption, and apply content marking as well, because we'll talk about here how you can create a watermark with this label. So we'll go ahead and check both of those boxes there. Come down to the bottom and click Next. Right. Right. So here we have our encryption settings. So what we will have here, as far as Marcus, no worries, that's totally fine. And yeah, we are recording the event here as well, so it's going to be available, as well as you can reach out to Ben at DivergeIT. Will be they'll have access to this meeting. You can talk more with Ben about that as well, or any questions that you have as well. And also recommend reaching out to Ben as well for some more information that he's going to be sharing here about a cool new cool product they have for you that can really add some, even a stronger posture here within your organizational security. So, but I appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much. Yeah, no problem. All right. Cool. So what I also want to do here before we move into this encryption setting is kind of talking about here. I do have some questions I want to kind of ask everybody, just to kind of gauge here as we're letting this idea of policies kind of sink in from the previous exercise before we talk about the encryption status. This is all, this is tying into what we're doing now as well. So that's why I like to save it here. But does your company, and I threw that poll out there, you'll see it pop up. Do you have to comply with, any kind of compliance standards? HIPAA, GDPR. We've been focusing more on finance, so that isn't the case here. But for maybe potentially passing an IT security audit, as well as even if that's not the case or you're not sure, policies and compliance are great here for just organizational practices, and I kind of bring that up as well. With both, because you want to make sure that you are, compliant in and outside your organization. So we'll go ahead and throw that poll up there. And, really appreciate if you do know, or even if you don't, letting us know. Awesome. Right. Right. That's awesome. I appreciate everybody filling that out. That is great. So let's finish up making this label. So you have the option to, assign the permission or let users assign when they apply the label. in this case, we're just going to have it essentially the label policy itself automatically apply it. So just leave that as assigned permissions now. And what we want to do is come down here where it says assign permissions to specific users or groups. And if you take a look here, essentially there's a little info option here. So they can interact with the content that is this label applied. So essentially who has access here to this will go ahead and they're essentially, you want to give them either like contributor access or owner or author, I'm sorry, owner or essentially reviewer. So this is where you have the ability to really fine tune this as far as who has the ways to go ahead and monitor and make sure that the label is being applied correctly when encryption needs to be revoked, or how to share it, those sort of things. You want to specify usually some sort of administrative position depending on what the label is applying to. Like these are the way you're utilizing your or your Entra ID, which formerly known as Active Directory or Azure Active Directory. So you'll hear me keep flip-flopping between those two. It's going to take me a while to get used to that. So what we're going to do is just essentially assign ourselves to it. It's going to make it easy enough. The policy will still be created and the label will still be applied, but we would be the ones that would essentially have those. We want to essentially give ourselves a co-author to this, co-author access, so we can make some changes if need be. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the option to add a user or a group. And I'm just going to go ahead and search for my persona. And what you can do is search for your own as well. In this case, my user is the CIE administrator. So I'm just going to go ahead and search for CIE and go ahead and choose myself. You could add anyone to it. It really doesn't matter. But I'm just going to add myself in this case and go ahead and save that. All right. So then we're going to go ahead and hit next down at the bottom here. And this is what gets into the content marking. So this is essentially that watermark that's going to be applied to the document. If you want to apply it, you don't even need to. But in our case, for fun, we'll go ahead and walk through this real quick and turn on that little content marker sliding to where you can add a footer, a header, a watermark with the specific text to it. So I'll just leave it on a footer and customize the text down at the bottom to where you can go ahead and say, what is the text saying? So I could say this page contains PII, just letting here whoever's reviewing the document be able to view that here specifically within a watermark. And you can leave the font size the same. You can choose the font color. It really doesn't matter where it aligns. Whatever is the practice within your organization for this is totally fine. But I'll just go ahead and save that here so I can have a content marking applied to it. Right. So if we go ahead and come down to, once again, the next button at the bottom of the bottom of your page, this is where essentially we can go ahead and this is, excuse me. So this is where we're essentially adding the condition that the auto labeling to it. Instead of manually reviewing it, for example, we want to go ahead and auto label these files or these emails with this label. But we have to go ahead and specify and tell the label what exactly it's looking for. We've typed in and said it's social security number. But remember we talked about that information type earlier on in that policy. This is where we set that. So what we need to do is go ahead and add a condition to this label. And if you click on add a condition, you're going to have the option that says content contains. And if you click on that, you're going to get this option here to where this is a group of, and we saw it earlier on, there was one group that contained, it was credit card number and the confidence, banking, routing number, confidence with that. We need to add that info type to this essentially group within this label. So what we're going to do, and we don't need to name the group, you can just leave it default, that's totally fine. But what we're going to do is click add down at the bottom and then choose here from our sensitive info types. And this will pop out a blade on the right hand side, and you can see there are natively within that exist within Purview 313 different sensitive info types, which have to do with a lot of like compliance and things like that, and regulations and information that was being monitored. So what we're going to search for, and you can take a look, and these are all regions, across. You'll see some for Canada, Bulgaria, Brazil, just to name a few off the top. But if you go ahead and just search for SSN for Social Security number and hit enter, you'll have the option to see that we have our US Social Security number, and that is the info type that we want this label essentially monitoring for. So we're going to go ahead and choose our Social Security number for the US and come down to the bottom here and click add. And once again, there's a confidence level, everything like that. You can set that as you wish. I'll just leave it on medium. It's totally fine. All right, so what I want to go now is hit next. And this is essentially, these are going to get these two settings that we didn't turn on for groups and sites, as well as schematized data assets if you hit next again. Like I said, we didn't turn those on here for this example. It gets a little too complicated here for the time that we have. So, and we'd like to just cover a more wide range of things here today. So we'll go ahead and hit next one more time, and then we'll go ahead and click finish, or create a label to go ahead and finish down at the bottom. Right. Give this a second here to create the label. So you have the, as far as you can publish this label to your groups and users to where they're allowed to go ahead and add it to the documentation if it contains that. But you have also the ability to go ahead, and we kind of set it up here within the label itself to automatically apply the label to sensitive content. So it's going to go ahead and automatically apply it no matter what. So the user essentially doesn't have that access to it. So that's the option that we're going to use here, is this automatically apply the label to sensitive content, and go ahead and click done. That's going to pop out this blade here on the right-hand side, where we get into the whole idea of like creating a policy, because policies are what enforce our labels. So if you go ahead and click create a policy down here at the bottom right-hand corner, that will go ahead, and this blade won't go away. So just go ahead and close it, because that policy is now, essentially we have to publish it to that to a policy now. So it is a little weird. If you click for view policy, it takes you here to that, but I'm going to head back here, and we're going to go ahead and manually walk through it. So let me head back to my labels. Sorry about that. All right. So we'll walk through, and I didn't actually mean to click create policy. We're going to walk through it manually. Sorry about that, everybody. So we're going to talk about now publishing the label to the policy. I said that, and then I went against what I was saying in my own head, so I do apologize for that. So what we're now going to do is go ahead and choose, didn't mean to do that, sorry. Go ahead and choose the label that we just created. And what we're going to do, check the box next to it. And what we're going to do there is go ahead and choose the option to publish our label. And that's going to get us into create a policy. So I got ahead of myself there because I wanted to walk through this manually with you. All right. So essentially, we're creating a policy to enforce a label, in the publishing of our label that we created. So now what we're going to do is come down to the bottom and hit next once again. Because this is essentially, it's like the who, what, and where. Essentially, we have those same options in creating and publishing a label to a policy. But it's a little bit different as far as the policy we just created. But the whole thing here is essentially, who are we assigning the policy to? So we're not going to go ahead and select any groups or admins or admin units or anything like that. We're going to go ahead and apply it to our full directory, just like we did our policy before. And go ahead and click next once again. So this label also, because it's asked you this question, as far as, the label, who's it available for? Well, we're auto labeling, but your users also have the ability to manually assign it for example, as I mentioned before, like we chose to auto label it, but we want to go ahead and give everyone the opportunity to go ahead and utilize and assign this label as well. So what we'll do is go ahead and just leave users and groups, essentially all users and groups checked. You might save this for people who are reviewing documentation before it's being utilized, and they're only needed to go ahead and do that. But that's just for example. But we'll go ahead and click next once again here. And here set up the policies. It's some settings, which are, it's automatically being applied. So some of this gets a little redundant if you had it manually set up, because they can still manually add the label. So here it's asking as far as, users must provide justification to remove a label or lower its classification if it's information that, contains PII, but it has to be utilized in a certain way and it's within, not violating any, regulatory, laws or anything like that. You might want to give the users opportunity to go ahead and, provide or reasoning why it needs to be removed for whatever reason. So you could check that as well. You could also require users to apply the label or documents to their emails. If it doesn't have it already applied, which it's going to, but you could turn that on. You have that option as well. Applying it to Power BI content, you can turn that on as well. You have a couple different options here as what you're requiring of your users who are, sending documentations here on this label that would be applied, that this label would be applied to. So, like I said, settings don't really matter so much. Just want to walk through that. If we go ahead and hit next once again, this is where you specify here for the label that is going to be applied within this policy. So the default label from this dropdown, if you go ahead and click your dropdown, you're going to see your label name there because it's your policy that you're creating here from your label, publishing of this label. So I'm going to go ahead and click choose my label for my document. So automatically apply to those documents of, Word documents and things like that, but specifying which label. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit next once again to where you could go ahead and for the emails, you could have it be the same as a document, which the same as document, which is from the previous screen, or choose a different label. In this case, we're seeing here. We'll go ahead and hit next. As far as meetings are concerned, we talked about for Outlook calendars. Oh, Archie, no worries at all. Appreciate it. Great. That is awesome. I'll apply my label here as well for meetings and calendar events, just kind of walking through this. I don't have any Power BI information, so I don't need to worry about that. So I'll just say none for Power BI. And then all we need to do is give this up a name, our policy, just like we did before. So this is going to be my or Tyler's label policy. You can keep it really, and you don't even need to enter a description if you don't want to, just for the sake of time. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit next and submit this policy. And you'll get a notification here. It could take some time here for this to automatically be applied. You can see it takes up to 24 hours to publish the labels because it does have to be here. We talked about those encryption settings, everything like that does take a little bit of time. But that is how you create a label and create a policy essentially that creates that label. So what I wanted to do is ask everybody, I got some other questions for you. If off the top of your head, since we're walking through it, do you have sensitivity label policies in place that help educate your team against data loss prevention? Kind of walking through here, maybe, as far as the labels are concerned, you've dealt with this in the past from your organization or anyone in or within your organization, and this is how you're kind of maybe learning how to apply it on your own. So I want to go ahead and throw that question out there for everybody, since it's just what we're talking about. And while you're answering that, I want to talk about something here to where don't really have a, kind of a click through essentially for this or anything, but talk about something that is very, very, very important and heading back to one of our pillars I mentioned before, our first pillar of our Microsoft security, identity and access management. So, we're talking about your credentials, your users. So, strong passwords, encryption, but most importantly here is multi-factor authentication, which is MFA for short. And, And MFA is so important because credentials are a common target for hackers and a major source of data breaches, I should say. So, most breaches are really caused by lost or stolen credentials. So your password is just not, it's the first line of defense, but it's just not enough these days. And that second would be MFA, multi-factor authentication. This is utilizing things like Microsoft's Authenticator app or biometrics as well. If you have Windows Hello on your devices, you can go ahead and use those things here to where it's that extra layer of security to make sure that just a stolen password isn't going to result in a data breach. So MFA is super important. With setting up MFA, it's actually very easy. I can show you real quick on here within your admin center. You have a section here within your admin center. You don't have to follow along here if you don't want to. We're not going to require MFA in this demo account. But what you'll have here is your list of users. This is essentially your directory of your users here. To where you have the option for multi-factor authentication. So you can go through and make sure and turn it on essentially for a user to where essentially configure MFA here, and you can configure it for your entire tenant. Within Entra ID, it's a little bit easier, but you can also do it within your M365 within the user admin center as you have here. So essentially where it lets the user know they have to go ahead and download the Authenticator app and set up here this other form to authenticate themselves here in the login practice. Right. Cool. And I appreciate everybody filling out that. And for those here, I do have another question for you, kind of just talking about MFA briefly. But do you have here mainly MFA, but any kind of training as well to help your organization here, the people within your organization, protect you against bad actors, or is MFA a common practice here within your organization? Are you all using the Authenticator app or Windows Hello or anything like that? Really love to get your feedback on that as we go through here. And one thing I want to talk about here, since I don't have a real demo for it, is while you're filling that out, is talking about conditional access. So MFA is, and talking about logging in, is part of authentication. But the main thing that we're talking about here with this next essentially idea, which I'm going to talk about, is conditional access, is authorization. So there's two levels to that. It's a part of what's called identity and access management here within the Microsoft landscape. And conditional access is essentially making sure that people can who they are, depending on who they are, can access the things that they need. And within Entra ID, conditional access analyzes signals such as the user that is authenticated, or the device that they're authenticating from, or the location where they're logging in from, essentially VPN, to automate decisions and enforce organizational access policies for what they're trying to access, for resources, for example. So it allows you to, conditional access policies allow you to build conditions that manage security controls that can block access. It can require MFA as well, or it can restrict the user's session when they need to stay out of the user's way or when not to. So this is essentially a part of, it's like the basis of Microsoft's Zero Trust security posture management. So Microsoft provides security defaults that ensure a basic level of security enabled in tenants that are not utilizing Entra ID premium licensing. But with conditional access, you can create policies that provide the same protection as security defaults. And there's a lot of granularity to it. Very, very similar here to the idea of like creating a policy and things like that. With conditional access policies, or just specific kind of policy, it's more governing essentially the authorization to certain things within your tenant. Where here it has to do with, this is like data loss prevention, but I wanted to go ahead and bring that up as far as that's concerned, for the idea that we're talking about policies. This is getting more into the authentication or authorization aspect of it when talking about conditional access policies. They're a little bit different here, and the licensing's not set up for us correctly within this, but it is available to us. All right, cool. Giovanni, does this integrate with Duo? Yes and no. Within the authenticator with Microsoft, but the thing is, like, you can add essentially, all right, let's say here, and I'll answer this. Let's say I want to add like a guest user to my tenant. For them to authenticate and log in with Google, they would have to be logged into Google, but I can add like a guest user to this that has essentially, this is going to take us to your Entra ID, to where you can create a user and you specify here the user, how they're going to be able to log into it, and they can log in utilizing, third-party credentials, for example. It's like, have you ever been on an application where it's like you can log in with Facebook or log in with Google sort of thing? Well, you're logging into Google in order to log into that. So if you're logging in with the Google credentials, you would have Duo to go ahead and utilize that possibly. So you see what I'm saying? Like, there's some, like, I think moving forward, it's going to be the Microsoft Authenticator app is going to be required. I think it's like end of November. I could be wrong about that as far as what it's going to be required for MFA within your Microsoft, like within Microsoft tenants and things like that. But before that, I think it would be more of the sense of if you're utilizing those other credentials to access maybe certain things within Microsoft, which can be done, which can be assigned as far as the user credentials. It's those sort of like the idea, like logging into another, with Pinterest or something, most people don't have a Pinterest account. People have a Pinterest account through a Google account, for example. I mean, that's the best kind of example. That's the best way I can kind of think of it here and how that would apply to that question. So yes and no, I guess is the answer that I'm trying to get at. All right. So yeah, no problem. So what I want to talk about now is I'm going to go ahead and head back here. We're going to head back to our admin center. So I'm actually already there. I'm going to close Purview actually, and I'm just going to go ahead and head back here to our home admin center screen. So you should still have a tab open up with it. It probably is on the home screen because we opened up, remember, the compliance section here. And what I want to do is kind of move into this idea of, so we set up, you're within your organization, and you've set up policies, you've applied labels, you've specified conditional access, you have MFA enabled. But really, and it leads me into what Ben's going to talk about as well. But this is a tool that exists natively here right within, which is a part of Microsoft Defender, essentially, which is, how do I know how well I'm doing? Well, Microsoft offers you something called a secure score. And it's one of the tools that exists within Microsoft Defender, that other big portion of essentially the M365 security suite. That's the way I like to go ahead and talk about it. So what we're going to do is go ahead and head here to, in our admin centers on the left-hand side, let's head to our security tab there, security section. And this will take us to Microsoft 365 Defender. There it is. Sorry, it took a second there to pop up here on my screen. Like I said, these demo tenants are a little finicky, so I appreciate everybody's patience if certain things are taking a minute to spin up. So what we're going to do here is just to kind of move in to our next segment is head to our secure score section. So we're over here on the left-hand side. But this is where it's like the incident events management here, more of that as far as like incident alerts, like any kind of malicious attacks, like anyone possibly any kind of malware detected or anything like that. That's like Defender is more so on the side of that as far as hunting, threat hunting as well. While Purview is more on like the compliance and data loss prevention side of things. So that's why we're kind of switching gears here. But we can see here over on the left-hand side from our navigation hub, we have our secure score section. So let's just go ahead and click on that real quick because I do want you to be familiar with it and I do want you to understand it better because it's not like cut and dry. So I want to kind of give some insight into this and talk about it realistically as far as what it's telling you. So Microsoft Secure Score is identifying your security posture, your organization's security posture within Microsoft products, so to speak, or Microsoft features, or any kind of security that is enforced by Microsoft. So that's always one thing to keep in mind. There are a lot of security tools out there that also can go ahead and be utilized and within your tenants, within your Microsoft tenants. And third-party solutions are encouraged and welcomed by Microsoft here to anything to improve, to make it really benefits everybody. So what you get here on the security page is it is helpful in a lot of different ways. As far as here across the top, you have this recommended actions section. So I'm going to go ahead and invite everyone to click on that here to where you're going to see some actions that you can implement within your tenant. And what's really cool about it, if you essentially choose one, Blade will pop up here on the right-hand side and kind of talk about what it is and actually how to implement it. So Microsoft will just walk you through it, essentially, provide you the documentation that you need in order to do that. This is something to do with restricted anonymous users from starting Teams meetings. So that's done within the Teams Admin Center, that sort of thing. And you can go ahead and see here the impact on your score that it will have, your Microsoft Secure Score, for going ahead and implementing those changes. Which is really cool. So you go ahead and it'll go ahead and have that recommended to you. Right now, only Teams ones are showing up. I'm not sure why. There should be a lot more within these demo tenants, that's for sure. Because also I've made all of us global admins. So there's like 15 user accounts in our global admin, which is not a good idea, but for the demo purposes here today. And if you take a look over here at this metrics and trends section, you can go ahead and see here, this data set's not available right now. It will refresh it. Yeah, this tenants is being a little finicky right now. But what I wanted to talk about, I'll head back to the overview page to talk about this instead. So like secure scores in general, like honestly, 100% is not good. You're not going to be able to do anything within your tenant essentially. You have what Microsoft recommends is honestly anywhere from like 60 to 70% is usually what's to be expected. And in that metrics and trend section, you can actually hear if the data would show up, this comparison trend, you could compare it to your organization or other organizations of your size, as far as the amount of users is what it's talking about. So that sort of thing to go ahead and see how you compare to that to other organizations. Right. But like I said here, this is monitoring Microsoft products. So Microsoft security settings, things that we put into place with, MFA, for example, or access policies, things like that. So that's something you definitely want to keep in mind here moving forward. So like I said, it's not the end all be all. It's really the only thing that I want to go ahead and talk about and really put forward there. But I do want to show you where that is, and it is something good to monitor and to go ahead and assess over and make sure that your organization is aware of, because there's also things that if you're not working with any kind of partner or anything like that, you might not know to utilize to enforce. And depending on the size of your organization and certain roles that are assigned to your users, like let's say you have global administrators who essentially have like the God rights inside of your tenant. The idea of that those people are more susceptible to or if they are attacked or anything like that, or their credentials are compromised. That's a big, big, big deal within your organization. So certain things like global admins having MFA enabled, absolutely a must, 110%, 10 times over, that sort of thing. And it's also comes down to like assessing, how many people have access to certain things. And when it comes to like roles and things like that, as you're assigning them to your users within your organization, you really want to be specific about that and make sure that only the right people. And that comes into the idea of authorization, as I was mentioning before, with like access policies, also roles and things like that. You don't want too many people having too big of right sizing the access a user has within your tenant is super important. You want to make sure that no one has too much power, but you also want to make sure they have enough. So really scoping that down and there are a lot of like fine tooth, like essentially settings here within like Entra ID that we don't go through here in this training, but I do like to bring it up and talk about it to where you can specify specifically what certain users can do within certain resources or applications or things like that, or certain spaces or services, which is super important in that kind of keeping that security tight. So like I said, that's very specific to your organization, how many users you have, the type of data you deal with, all of those things. But it is very important to go ahead and keep in mind and monitor with that. All right. So what I want to do here, since we got about 10 minutes left, I want to go ahead and turn things over here to Ben. Ben, if you were there, I know you have some information that you want to go ahead and share with everybody as well. I've gone through as much as I could possibly fit into this, hour, 15, hour 20. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break here, Ben, and let you go ahead and, go ahead and take over here for me.
All right, thanks so much. You definitely need a jug of water for all the talking that you've been doing on so much information. It's really, really great. Thanks everyone again for joining. I'll keep it very brief. We have a free offering at DivergeIT where we can do a rapid assessment on your Microsoft environment. So I'm going to share my screen just to demonstrate that very briefly. Instead of having to poke around in the admin center in order to find exactly where these things are, we also have additional offerings to kind of aggregate everything into one spot, into one panel. And with that panel, you can really dive into your environment and see what's going on with your users. So I can see that the screen is up now. So I'm just going to cover a couple quick things that are involved with this. First of all, you can take a look at breaches in your environment. You can take a look at users that are active and inactive. Reason for that is that if you have a bunch of inactive users, not only could you potentially have licenses that are not being used and have some savings there, but if one of those accounts becomes compromised, there's no person there to say, hey, I'm seeing weird emails, or hey, things are looking weird. And that could be a red flag in a way that, a malicious actor can get into the environment. We were talking about MFA earlier. Absolutely 110% agree that an administrator has to have MFA, but others as well, because nowadays, I'm sure you all know that you're going to get into an environment usually through a person rather than through like the traditional hacking methods. Yes, pen testing and all that happens, in order to prevent network breaches, but usually if you're going to get in, it's through people. So with MFA by policy in your organization, you'll really help to shore that up. I mean, I can give away my password and no one would be able to get in regardless. So MFA, very important. And the assessment here can also, as I was mentioning, take a look at the licenses in your environment to see where those potential savings could be. Creating accounts for people and they don't actually log in and they're licensed, that could be a big savings for your organization. So really quick, I'll take a look at just the dashboard, taking a look at these active users. Some of them may be service accounts. This is just sample data, but some of them may be service accounts. So, whether they're active or never logged in, you'll keep those. But you could very quickly see, oh yeah, so-and-so actually was offboarded last month. Oh, why didn't we take her off? So it's really, a quick way to take a look at that. Same thing for MFA. You could get in here and also trigger administrators on and off to see if there are any admins that don't have MFA, which is literally like the gold medal for the hacker trying to get in. So making sure that both of those are shored up. On the savings side, you could take a quick look at potential licenses that could be saved. So in this hover, you can see that on the monthly, we might be able to save $1,300 because we have a bunch of E5 licenses that probably aren't being used. Same for some E3 licenses that aren't being used. So you can access this in the admin center, but not at this level. So for everybody that's here on the call today, we are offering this assessment for free. I can put the link in the chat, and basically what you would need to do is an administrator account logs in and permits just certain permissions for read only. It'll give you a listing from the Microsoft saying specifically what permissions we'd be looking for. So it's just like reading groups, all on the reading side. So feel free to reach out to me as well. If you wanted to put in chat that, I am interested in the assessment, we'd be happy to walk you through the process as well. But I'll drop the link in the chat there and just help you give a little extra visibility into your environment. Feel free to put any questions there you might have about this as well, but appreciate the opportunity maybe to help see where we can shore things up for you. And I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, sure. That's awesome. Awesome, Ben. Yeah, thanks so much. And we threw that poll out there for anybody who is interested here to go ahead and you can go ahead and let us know that way. As well as if what I really want to do here, since we have some time remaining, we can go ahead and I actually want to open up for questions. If anyone has any questions for myself or Ben, sometimes we work like all the way up to the very, very end, and then it's like, and then we got to go. And so I want to go ahead and, since we only have about, a little over 5 minutes, go ahead and use this time here for questioning instead of trying to go ahead and walk through something very quickly and maybe it not really settle and really be digested or well by any of you here. I don't want to rush or anything like that. But yeah, any questions about any features or, it be theoretically behind security as well. I mean, a lot of things are very specific to organizations, and that's why utilizing here tools like Ben just went ahead and talked about here with you with Rad to go ahead and really dive deep into the the granularity of your organization and really understanding your security posture the way it is, because we walked through just a couple different settings here today, a couple different things you can do. Well, I hate to let you know that there's a lot more that you could do and that you should be doing. So being able to utilize that service and get some help with that, because especially as your tenant starts to grow, it's like as your organization grows, you're adding more people. Security has to change with that. Security is kind of ever growing. It's always evolving. It evolves with your organization. Yes, there are these core things that you need to keep in mind, but it gets harder to manage the more and more people that you have in there. So utilizing different services out there like that, like here with native with Microsoft, or as far as Ben just went ahead and shared with you, are super important. So if you have any questions that are, about any of that, we're happy to answer it for you. Like I said, we got a few minutes left, but instead of diving into something here real quick, we can open this up. So feel free to come off mic if you'd like. Type it in the chat. Either way, totally fine with either one of us. Or if you got a good story for us or anything like that, or no. But that is a-okay.
That actually was a story I'm thinking of. Is I found out I had one of my passwords compromised because I had the Microsoft Authenticator app, the MFA, pop up to say approve this sign in, and I'm like, oh, I'm not signing in. Somebody's got a password somewhere. So it's also a good indicator to know when you are breached. So
yeah, it'll let you know. I mean, you're probably used to it. Like there's a lot, and it's like MFA is like it's become a common practice upon really everything. Like I always think about like you're logging in from a different device to an account. Like if I log into my bank on my laptop, maybe I don't normally do that. I use it on my phone, but I'm like saying, okay, is this your device? Even my fantasy football team, I had to authenticate it via a device, which was wild to me. And I'm like, some people take that real seriously. So I guess maybe I should understand that, but Even with that, I had to, MFA is being institutionalized, like, and it's not even a choice anymore. And really, the same thing's coming here for Microsoft is going to be for it. I think it's the end of November. I think it's best. I think it's or it's only the Authenticator app is what you can use. There's going to be no text or calling or anything like that because of phone numbers being compromised. It's much easier here for the app login to where they can go ahead and not any kind of bad actors with that. So.
Right. And same for like if you don't have access to your phone and you could have the app on another device or something like that, or an iPad or whatever.
Right.
So
exactly.
it does help on that side too. Because I've had that request to say like, well, what if I lose my phone? Is that it?
Yep. You don't have to go to work that day.
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
right.
can't sign in.
Okay, great.
Is that a regular? Yeah, MFA is a requirement. Yeah, Peter. It's become now that we're realizing here, and that's why we like to talk about it, because it is the way to Ben, as you said here, the traditional hacking is not, it's not like going through the back end, and no, they're coming in right through the front door, and it's credentials. It's the biggest thing. It's users. It's us. We're all like, I always say, we're all a little wormhole inside of an organization, and that's the authentication. But then as far as how wide does it get on the back end, that's what you're authorized to do. So that's why it's also, yes, the authentication, but authorization, huge part of it, as far as what people have access to what, and making sure that not too many people have access to the things they don't need. Very industry specific. That's why utilizing like a tool like yours to go ahead and look into that and kind of get a score on that, to maybe like, okay, why is this user has nothing to do with our databases or utilizing our data? Why do they have a contributor role to our SQL server? Like why is that there? There's no reason for that. It's things like that, and those are things that get overlooked. It's just like, add a new user, just give them the license, turn this on, and then we want to get them to work. But it's really about, okay, well, you gotta really constantly be assessing this stuff. So that's why I always like to talk about that, and especially the tools here that you have to offer, and the expertise is super important to go ahead and take advantage of, for sure. All right. Well, unless anyone doesn't have any other questions, we're going to go ahead and end this here, land this plane on time, because I know you're all, obviously other meetings and everything like that. We understand, but really want to appreciate everybody, or really want to thank everybody for being here today and spending some time with us. Like I said, the polls were out there. Please answer those as well if you want any more information here of anything we talked about here today, or as far as Rad here, as far as what Ben specified here and showed you there in that little demo. That'd be fantastic. Really appreciate your time, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully we get to talk to you all again sometime soon. So with that being said, enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.